Welcome to Stimulate Conversations, a sexual wellness business discussions podcast that supports the vast range of professionals supporting consumers from a business perspective within the sexual wellness space. My name is Nicole Lameck, your host, and the founder of Stimulate, a B2B sexual wellness trade show held annually in Nashville, as well as many other Stimulate experiences throughout the year. I'm also author of the book Retail 101 from McGraw-Hill and professor of retail marketing at Columbia, Chicago. From head to toe, young to mature, purpose to pleasure, Stimulate Conversations is committed to supporting sexual wellness professionals. Together with industry leaders as our guests, we look forward to delivering trusted and important conversations to help support retail, wholesale, spa, salon, and medical professionals who collectively want to help elevate and support their consumers within the sexual wellness community from an educated and professional perspective. Listeners of Stimulate Conversations can look forward to gaining expert-led insight from industry leaders, ranging from doctors to retail operational experts to industry visionaries and more. Without further ado, let's dive into Stimulate Conversations. Welcome to another edition of Stimulate, where I am so excited to share yet another perspective of business with trademark attorney Laurie Marshall. Laurie and I have had the pleasure to work in a variety of ways together over the years, and I truly believe businesses, small and large alike, can benefit from her immense wisdom. And on that note, Laurie, welcome. I'd love for you to share with us a brief snapshot of your professional history so that our listeners can get to know you a bit.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Nicole. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for watching and tuning in. So I've been doing trademarks for, I hate to say it, but close to like 30 years. Most of my career, I was at Major League Baseball. For a large chunk of my career, I was at Major League Baseball. I worked protecting all of the different club trademarks, which was fun and exhausting, all the same. Before that and after that, I worked at several of the large law firms related, all doing trademark work. But for the last 13 years, I've had my own law firm. As part of my law firm, I still work for Major League Baseball. I work for some of the clubs. I work for the NBA. I work for some very large organizations and companies, but I do dedicate about 60-70% of my workload on small businesses and entrepreneurs, because that's a really important part of trademarks, because they're the ones that get taken advantage of. They're the ones that can get screwed in certain situations. And I don't want that to happen. I don't like that to happen. And that's why I actually speak a lot on trademarks all over the country. I've been asked to speak, and I just like to impart wisdom on small businesses. So at least if they don't do the right thing when it comes to trademarks, at least they understood trademarks and understood the risks that they were taking. But that's a really important part, because most small businesses and entrepreneurs actually don't understand about the risks that they're taking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, where you and I have had the opportunity to meet is at events where you've spoken at some events that I've produced, and I've also spoken with you, I believe, a few times. And one of the things that always amazes me in general about professionals is we simply don't know what we don't know. We are all respectfully experts or, understanding a category that you might not or I might not, which is why it's so important to lean into experts like yourself in the places that we simply don't know. And trademarks are certainly among those things. And so if you could give our listeners a trademark one-on-one lesson, if you will, before we get into the nitty-gritty, what would you tell them?
Well, it seems like a lot of people get confused about intellectual property. They think that a trademark is a copyright is a patent is a copyright. So the first thing I like to do is kind of explain to people with an analogy about the difference of those three types of intellectual property, because they really all focus on different things. So the way I do this is by thinking about a television set, and first thinking about the trademark for the television set. The trademark is the name brand. So Sony, Vizio, Sharp, any of those types of companies, that's the brand of the television. It is the trademark of the television because that's what a trademark is. The copyright relates to the content that's broadcast on the television. So a TV program, a movie, a sports game, and a lot of times you might actually hear, if you guys are sports fans and watch sports games, you'll hear at the end of a broadcast, it'll say, "This is, this sports program is not for rebroadcast." They're all the copyrights and trademarks are can be licensed by the NFL or Major League Baseball, whatever whatever the organization is that's providing that sports uh, competition or sports game, and they're specifically telling you that they own the content, so they own that game, and any rights for you to be able to rebroadcast it needs to be licensed through them. That's the copyright aspect of the television set. The patent is the wiring behind the television set. Like, how can this TV set that, anybody as old as me, or, we used to have like these TV sets that were like 500 pounds and this wide. Now they're like this wide and it hangs on our wall. Like, how does that happen? Well, all those wires and chips behind the television set and gives you the ability to hang it on your wall. That's really about the patent. That is the technology behind the television set. So in a nutshell, that is the difference in your IP, different types of IP, trademark versus copyright versus patent. So I like people to be able to understand that. Here, we're going to focus on trademarks, right? I think that's our main focus here. Trademarks, as I told you, Sony, Vizio, Sharp, essentially any word or design, numbers, letters, slogans, taglines that are used to sell your goods or services, that's what a trademark is. So many people will, come up with some catchy phrase to sell their goods or services, and they won't realize, that's a trademark, and you need to be concerned about that and go through the same process you would to, get your trademark surge cleared, registered. You need to go through that same process with your taglines. The same thing with any designs. A new thing these days, and when I say these days, I mean for the last couple of years, are people are using icons. So they're creating a logo and then they're just grabbing like a little piece of it and using it as an icon for, their app, or, to just take that and use it for multiple social media references, that little icon, whether it's the Twitter bird or the Nike swoosh. And that's really concerning for me as a trademark attorney, because you just can't grab a piece of your logo and just say, I'm going to use this alone, because then there's definitely more of a likelihood it can be confusingly similar to someone else's mark. But these are all trademarks, and I guess what we're just going to discuss more about today.
So, okay, now you actually sparked a question for me, which is, most brands in theory should have multiple trademarks. Would you say that's true? Like a brand, like, let's take Stimulate the Show. We'll overanalyze our own business here. In addition to the name Stimulate, what I heard you say was that we should consider also having a trademark for our tagline. Is that true?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
For your tagline. The main thing is, and what we're going to talk about here is the fact that there are two really important parts of the trademark process. The first is to make sure it's available, to make sure that you're not taking somebody else's trademark or someone else's slogan and using it as your own. Because could you imagine if you just went out with the mark, with it, just do it. You tell your, you tell your clients and your customers, just do it. Could mean lots of different things, but but from Nike's perspective, no matter how you use just do it, they're not going to be happy about it. So even if you use it on your goods and services versus on sneakers and apparel and stuff like that, they're still going to have a problem with it. And so you need to worry about, does anybody else own Just Do It? And we need to make sure that it's searched and cleared like we would any other mark before you were going to go out and use it. And then on the flip side, as I said, there are two parts of this. On the flip side, you want to make sure that you protect it so no one else uses whatever that phrase is, and not Just Do It, whatever that phrase you decide on, and make sure nobody else uses it, just like Nike would protect Just Do It.
I feel like you've answered a question I was going to ask you, which is, can you elaborate on what trademarks offer beyond what might be considered obvious? So if there's anything else to that you want to add, feel free to chime in here, because definitely you've already given me a lot of insight, and I'm sure our listeners too.
Well, I just want to kind of elaborate or like, break that down, because with regard to trademarks, we could either be talking about common law trademarks, which are trademarks just out there and used in the marketplace, or we can talk about registered trademarks, because those are two different types of protection, but two protections nonetheless offered with regard to trademarks. So, common law trademarks are, you just went out and started using your mark. You might have searched and cleared it and make sure it wasn't available, but if you went through that process, you might have registered it. Or you just willy-nilly decided, you know what? I don't know anything about trademarks, so I'm just going to go out and use this. It's a risk, so I don't promote that. But at the same time, by just using your mark, well, you might just get in a lot of trouble because you haven't gone forward with the process and someone else might own that mark. But at the same time, there are downsides on that all, because your common law rights don't extend very far. And a lot of people I'll hear in passing say, "Oh, I own like rights. I heard I just own rights just for using it." Yeah, your rights are like this small just for using it, and it really applies to exactly what you're selling or doing. So not like this and not like this. Which is what a trademark registration does for you. It only applies to the select area, geographic area that you're doing that, selling those products or services in. Your rights are very limited. You couldn't really oppose somebody else who's using your mark. So common law rights, I never advise. Trademark registration takes it to another level, a different level, the level that you should be on if you're selling products, especially out there in the marketplace, or even, performing services to a certain degree. But it's a huge asset for you. One of the main things that the problem I have is if somebody doesn't go forward with the trademark process early on, and again, you could wind up in issues with regard to using someone else's mark. But if you wait until all of a sudden you have a purchaser that comes along that wants to buy your business because you've really worked hard to get this off the ground, and now people are interested in what you're doing and they want to buy it, then they wanna buy the brand with it. Now, I've had a lot of people approach me at, like, the 11th hour about to get a signature for the purchase of their brand for millions of dollars, and they don't own a trademark. And the purchaser is like, "I'm not signing this. You don't own a trademark in this brand. Like, what is this gonna do for me without your owning the rights to it?" So then we try to search and clear it and register it at the last moment, and we can't because somebody else owns rights to it. You might not have known this, but somebody has valid rights in the same mark or a similar mark. And that's problematic, not to own that right from the get-go. So not to own a registration from the get-go. So there's an incredible amount of value behind owning a trademark registration. Also, the trademark office won't know about you otherwise, and they'll let other people come and register their mark on the trademark register because they don't know you exist. And that's not their responsibility to protect your common law mark. Additionally, a registration gives you nationwide rights. As I told you, common law rights give you this much. A registration gives you the entire country. So, a trademark registration, if I'm going to break down what you've asked here, a trademark registration is incredibly valuable to protecting your business for many different ways. Common law, that doesn't give you a lot. So,
Super, super fascinating. You always teach me so many new things. Even my dogs are interested because they're barking away and enjoying it as well. Um, I want to take a complete 180 here and ask you what I love asking strangers, friends, business colleagues, peers alike. Tell me something I should know that we all should know, yet I would never even know to ask you about when it comes to trademarks.
yeah, I mean, I get a lot of little questions about, the protection and all of that. But what I'm going to talk about is what you should be thinking about when you're coming up with your trademark, when you're coming up with your brand. Because some people come to me and they, have been using their brand for several years and haven't gone through this process. Some other people come to me where they're looking to launch and they drop in my lap a mark. And I'm kind of like, yeah, I know that's what you're thinking about, but it's not the best mark for what you're looking to sell or what you're looking to do. And I wish more people knew and asked the question ahead of time. What should I look for when I'm creating a brand name? And even though this is more like there are namers out there that help you create a brand name and this is more in their domain, from a trademark sense, the a mark that you would want to use for your goods and services is a mark that's not too descriptive. And a lot of people want to, go and just use the most descriptive term or phrase to sell their goods or services. And it's very hard to protect things that are so descriptive. Like, for instance, the Weather Channel. That's an incredibly descriptive mark. And you might say, wait a second, somebody owns the Weather Channel, right? And that is true. Somebody owns the Weather Channel. But it took them a lot to actually get to that point where they were able to show the trademark office that when people heard the phrase the Weather Channel, they knew who that was. They knew that it was, the certain types of weather forecasters that by name, and the little blue box on the corner of the screen that says TWC. They are able to associate that as the source of origin for the Weather Channel. That is incredibly hard to do, and not most small businesses and entrepreneurs can make that connection so that the trademark office would say, yes, you should get exclusive rights to use these words, because by your having exclusive rights, no one else can use it. So by starting out with a descriptive mark, you're working uphill at that point, and you don't want that to be the case. You could always use descriptive wording to describe what your product is, like down underneath your brand, but that shouldn't be your brand's name. Additionally, I don't love when a client comes to me with a brand name that has absolutely no relationship to the goods and services. That's just completely, as we call it, arbitrary, or a coined mark, like the word Amazon has no relationship to, e-commerce platform. Like Google has no relationship to 0.00001% or whatever it actually means. Those again are really hard marks for a consumer to know, oh, that's that company. Again, you need a lot of money to advertise that. So my favorite marks are marks that tell a little bit, that don't give away the farm, but tell a little bit. And you could do that in multiple ways. One is, say, for instance, the cronut. I don't know if some people out there have heard of the cronut. It's from a bakery in Manhattan. And they put together a croissant and a donut, made it into this flaky pastry product. And they put together the words cronut, croissant and donut into one word, made it the cronut, and they actually cornered the market on that bakery product. So became really hard for anybody else to sell that bakery product, although you could, because they didn't own the rights to the bakery product. They own rights to call it the cronut, and it became really difficult for anyone else to sell that product. So that name was very unique, but it had the word croissant and donut in it. So you see where it came from. And so that's a great type of mark. Other types of marks that I just love is taking the descriptive term that relates to what you're doing and just adding a prefix or a suffix to it. Because then you have what you're doing and it's in the mark, but you've made it different. For instance, Tattly is a children's tattoo company. Like, they make little children's tattoos, and they took tattoo. They put ly to it, which is really cute because if you're doing for kids, add the ly, it just makes sense. And they call themselves Tattly, so it's already, there. I have a client who has a company that appraises coins and stuff, and he registered the mark Coinfully, which I love and I think is really cute because it gives you an idea of what he's doing. Those are really good trademarks. And so if you're still coming up with a mark for your products, services, goods, whatever it is you're doing, kind of keep this in mind when you're creating that name.
such valuable insight. Seriously, this is why I have loved welcoming you to various events that I've produced over the years. And I love learning from you, to be honest. And I know our audience is primarily retail and or e-commerce operators, as well as vendors, exhibitors, brands. Many of them sell in marketplaces. Many of them sell direct to consumers. Some are even spas or medical clinics, medical professionals, online sellers, a variety of listeners here. And I'm painting the picture so you understand exactly who I'm talking about. So I want you to share some advice with them if they're feeling like they did not take the necessary steps to protect their brand or business.
Well, I mean, I get a lot of people who haven't gone through the process in a timely fashion. Yes, I get people who say to me, "When is the right time?" And I tell them the right time is if I have to tell you that you need to change your brand and it's gonna devastate your business, you might be a little late for the process, but it does not mean you shouldn't go through the process. As I said, you know, maybe it's lucky that you haven't got sued at this point because you were using someone else's name, but still you don't wanna be in the situation where somebody wants to purchase your business and you don't have a trademark for your brand. So you want to go forward with it like now if you haven't, but it's never too late. I actually have a client whose business was over 100 years old. It was a five and dime store. Yeah, it was a five and dime store that went down from generation to generation. And it was over 100 years old. And what's great is on a trademark application, we can put when the mark was first used. So even though the registration date might be, now, today, tomorrow, whenever, we could put down that the mark was actually used, whatever, 5, 10, 100 years ago
Mhm.
in the application so people can see that, and they can see that, they might only have owned a registration for a year, but they've owned rights in this mark, and they've been, selling these products or performing these services for X amount of time, which is great. So you should do it as soon as you realize that this is, something you missed in the process. But at the same time, I wouldn't beat yourself up because I get a lot of clients who realize, "Oh my god, I forgot this," or, "Oh my god, I didn't realize that I forgot this because I thought," there are lots of misnomers in the world of trademarks, and a lot of the reasons, many of the reasons why people don't go forward with the trademark process is because they think they've done something to actually give them rights, such as creating an LLC. That's a big one. That's one of the biggest misnomers is someone's like, "Oh, I already own rights in my trademark because I own an LLC or an S corp. That gives me rights." And I say, "No, that doesn't give you rights to use that name, that brand on goods and services to sell goods and services because that's a completely different process, and people get really confused by that."
Yeah, that's again such amazing insight. And then you shared a lot of really fun stories. That 100-year-old brand story, that various other. Is it a croissant, a donut? Is that what that is?
Cronut,
That,
yeah, croissant
okay.
donut,
Next
cronut.
time I'm in Manhattan, I'm definitely looking that up. But I want to ask you: have you ever had? I'm sure you do. Any other favorite stories that kind of shed light to what trademarks really mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've got lots of stories of crazy things that's happened. One of the stories that can tie into another learning lesson for the audience here is, again, it relates to a misnomer, and one of that misnomer is a lot of people think that if the domain name is available, that means the mark is available, and they're like, "How could somebody own the mark and own rights in the mark, but the domain name is still open? That makes no sense to me." And sometimes it's because the domain name, like for instance, when I've done searches in the past, like Starbucks Coffee Company is actually available because they own other forms of Starbucks, the domain name, but you can't actually put every single variation together to make up a domain name. No matter how much money you have as a business, you can't actually think of every variation and own every single variation with your mark. So, yeah, you can't go out with Starbucks Coffee Company because it's already owned by somebody, the actual mark. So the availability of the domain name has no relationship to it. So I had a potential client once come to me a few years back, and he says to me, "I want to own the trademark Dustbuster for a cleaning product." And, it was a little weird and awkward, and I probably wasn't very nice because I was just so surprised and shocked by that question. And I said, I'm sure you know Black& Decker has long time rights in Dustbuster for cleaning products." And he said, "No, no, no. I actually own the domain name. I purchased the domain name." And I said, "Yeah, a domain name is really no different than a street address. So you get no rights just because you own a street address, just because I operate my business on, at 1015 Fifth Avenue, it doesn't mean I own 1015 Fifth Avenue. So unless I called my store 1015 Fifth Avenue. So you get no rights associated with the domain name. But this potential client seemed to think he owned something because he bought the domain name. And he got really upset and angry with me, like, I'm just the messenger here. And he said to me, "Well, what am I supposed to do? I spent $5,000 on this domain name. I don't know what I could do at this point." Of course, I don't know what he could do with it either. He can't even offer it back to Black& Decker for $5,000 because that's illegal, to try to sell a domain name that another entity might own the rights to it. So that's one of my learning lesson stories.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I mean, certainly, I'm sure there's a lot of lessons being learned from our listeners, and I want to make sure they know where to get in touch with you. So, if someone's listening and they're probably thinking a lot of different things right now, hopefully, many of them are feeling confident and secure, but some of them might not be. How can they get in touch with you?
Well, I give a free 15-minute consultation. So if you're interested in a consultation, the best way to do it is email me and we can set up something, and we can discuss what your needs are and what you need and whether you do need anything.
And what's your email?
Laurie, Laurie at TM, like trademark, TM the spot, TMTHESPOT.com.
Okay, perfect. I have a feeling you'll get quite a few emails. I hope you do. I hope you do, because it means you're helping people. And that's always the goal of Stimulate Conversations, is to help people. So finally, as part
Yeah.
of our Stimulate Conversations experience, I have some rapid fire questions for you. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. And if you could simply reply with a few words each, that would be great. And, this is a sexual wellness business discussions podcast. So if you're ready, I'm ready, and we will kick it off then.
It feels like a game show. Do I get to win a prize at the end?
No, I wish that would be so fun. I need to do that. And I'm like, that's a good idea. No, the prize is we get to be entertained and learn from you. So it's really, you're giving it to us.
Okay.
I appreciate it. So what does sexual wellness mean to you?
I guess like physical and emotional health regarding sexuality.
Love that. And how do you define good customer service?
I am a stickler for good customer service. That's really important to me when I'm dealing with a business. I'll tell you, I hate Amazon because they're such a conglomerate and they put a lot of people out of business. But then again, I love Amazon because they do it right when it comes to customer service. They will reimburse you money for anything that you know, was incorrect about your order. And they make it pretty easy to call, to chat, to email if there was an issue. So I just feel like compensating people if, something's wrong, I think is really important. And, I've done that in my, trademark life. If, something ever goes wrong, whatever, I'll try to my best to compensate, because people make mistakes and it just happens. But the thing is, owning up to those mistakes is really important.
Really good insight there. And what keeps you personally inspired?
I'd be lying if I didn't say my kids. My kids inspire me. I have two.
Two amazing kiddos. I've had the privilege of following along and meeting them one point a while ago. So, and what about professionally? What keeps you professionally inspired?
I love my job. I love what I do, and I will tell you one of the main reasons. Well, there are two parts of it. One is I love working with people who I know need me. It's in life you feel like you really want to make a difference, and initially I thought it was, saving the planet and, helping the homeless and people like that really needed my help. And when I realized that this was my path, I wasn't sure it was the right path for me. But then I realized I am helping people. I am helping people launch their business because a lot of people realize that this is one of the first steps in launching their business. So I've had people call me and write to me and thanking me with so much gratitude that they never could have gotten their business off the ground if it weren't for me. So that really inspires me. And additionally, for more of the uh, specifics of my business, I think what inspires me is the fact there's an ever-changing landscape. Like, differences in all of what we do today and what we did 20 years ago are really impactful in what I do. I mean, we didn't have mobile phones, 50 and 20, 25 years ago. And when we started with the mobile phones and we started with apps, NFTs, artificial intelligence, all of this factors into trademarks in multiple different ways. So in a lot of professions, things like this won't change how your business works. But for my business, all of this, changes different aspects of my business.
Yeah, it's ever evolving, which is very cool. I know even from my own personal experience, I've worked with you through evolving businesses. So it's very cool to see how you're also able to relate that. And finally, what's the best advice that you have for business leaders?
The best advice that I have and that I've tried to follow through my business, because I'm a small business too, so I operate on both sides, and that is just hiring the right people to work with you. You can't do everything all of the time, and you need people to work with you, and things that you might not be great at, you need to delegate that. And you need to find the right staff and find people that you trust, because if you don't, then you're just going to wind up doing it yourself. And that's, the antithesis of what hiring people is for. So, yeah, hiring the right support staff and then, or just the right staff, and then delegating some of that work out.
Yeah, I love that. Great advice. I'll expand on that and say it's your internal team, but also your external partners, like, for example, you would be to a business. So great advice, Laurie. Thank you so much. On behalf of the entire Stimulate team and myself, we appreciate you sharing your time and your wisdom with our Stimulate community. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, and to those who have tuned in today, thank you as well.
Bye.
Stimulate Conversations offers year-round ways to stay in touch between our podcasts, including a private Facebook community for ongoing and more in-depth discussions, which you can find via Facebook at the group name Stimulate, Sexual Wellness Business Discussions. You can also stay connected via Instagram at the handle Stimulate the Show. And you're welcome to email us at stimulate@retailminded.com. I'm Nicole Leinbach, founder of Stimulate and your host. And together with the entire Stimulate team, we look forward to continued discussions that will, you guessed it, keep you stimulated on the business of sexual wellness. Till next time, stay stimulated.